The depths of Ymir's heart are difficult for us to describe, as we never receive any direct insights as to what her motivations are. Any information about her motivations are merely interpretations made by other characters in the story. With the recent airing of Chapter 122's adaptation in the Attack on Titan anime, I thought of an interesting interpretation of her character. It's not an interpretation that I'm very confident in, and I believe there are a few contradictions if you explore her much later actions more deeply, but it's something I found interesting, so here we go. Episode 80 of Attack on Titan adapts Ymir's backstory from Chapter 122 of the manga. For the most part, it's a very faithful adaptation of the manga content with a few minor additions to the story of Ymir's life. However, some of the ambiguity of the original chapter is replaced with more concrete interpretations. By seeing the guards push Ymir towards the slave getting his tongue cut off, we lose any ambiguity as to how far into her life her tongue was removed. By changing the location and adding guards near the kiss that Ymir sees, we're told that the kiss is by and to the king. By giving Ymir a voice when she's being chased down, we're told that she is just a normal person and afraid. And by showing Ymir only beginning to cry when seeing the flower that is framed right in front of her face, we're told that Ymir is crying due to what the flower means to her. Although most of these adaptation choices are insignificant and don't change how I view Ymir at all, the king being involved in the kiss and the anime clearly showing Ymir crying on seeing the flower are significant reductions in ambiguity compared to the manga that I think warrant discussion. To explain how these particular adaptation choices inform my view of Ymir, we have to go back to another addition that is unique to the anime, and that's the bridging of the adjacent scenes of her village's destruction and what may be the first kiss that Ymir has ever truly internalized. The way the manga bridges these two contradicting atmospheres is by using a loose symmetry in panel size and location to frame both events as equally important yet starkly contradictory. This is impossible to translate directly into an anime format, so what we get instead is a stark juxtaposition of the rising embers of her burning village with the falling celebratory flower petals that permeate Ymir's field of view as she witnesses the kiss. These flower petals are nowhere to be seen in the manga, but are a neat addition that really emphasize the clearly contradicting atmospheres, while also giving Ymir an object to forever associate with the moment of the kiss. Now skipping forward to the final chapter of the manga, Eren states that when he touched Ymir, he felt that Ymir loved the king. But my interpretation based on this episode is that Eren's statement is incomplete. On seeing the kiss involving the king, Ymir decided that she wanted to be loved, and in doing so she chose to love the king, the first man who she internalized being kissed amongst an atmosphere of sheer joy and celebration, an atmosphere that starkly contradicted her recent life experience of the burning embers of her village. Seeking happiness amidst a life of pure misery, she emotionally latched on to the first moment of happiness she was able to properly process in her new life as a slave. She associates the act of love she was witnessing with the positive atmosphere and falling petals surrounding it. In essence, Eren interprets her feelings inaccurately. Ymir may have loved the king, but it's not as straightforward as Eren seems to describe. Whenever Ymir thinks of happiness, she thinks of freedom from her terrible enslavement. And when she thinks of her freedom, she thinks of the happy environment she witnessed on the day of the internalized kiss, which contradicted the pure misery of her village's destruction up to that point. And when she thinks of the happiness she witnessed that day, she feels a deep desire of wanting to experience the feeling of being loved, like the two involved in the couple, to her eyes, seemed to experience on that day. So on being set free by the king for letting the pig escape, one of her eyes is removed and she is hunted down. Stumbling to the floor as she's hit by an arrow, she looks at the flower in front of her, reflects for a moment, and cries. Her spirit wasn't broken by the burning of her village or the cutting of her tongue. It wasn't broken by the removal of her eye, and it wasn't broken by the vicious contest to hunt her down. What ended up breaking her spirit in the end was the blatant contradiction between her hopes and dreams and her ever-present reality. A contradiction that she finally accepts when it's blatantly shoved in her face as she falls down in front of the flower whose petals are stained in her own blood. Being confronted with her harsh reality, she accepts that she will never be loved, and she breaks down crying. But after giving up on her dream, she doesn't die. She falls into the tree and is given the power to create anything she wants. She chooses to build a body that is larger, stronger, and undying, so that perhaps through being more useful, she can be loved. And naively regaining hope that her dream may come true at last, she returns to the king. But still, she doesn't feel loved. She gives birth to the king's children, but even then she doesn't feel loved. She even gives up her own body to save the king's, and all she is left with is a hole in her heart. So she gives up on her dream for a second time, but again she doesn't die. Instead, she wakes up in an eternal void and continues to serve the king, grasping desperately to the one image of happiness that's seared in her mind, as she lives a torturous experience for unquantifiable eons until the day she finally sees a person give up the love that she had been so desperately clinging onto. She can now pass on for a third final time. So that's my interpretation of Ymir based on some adaptation choices made by the anime. But I haven't really taken a step back and looked at all of Ymir's appearances in the manga, so I haven't really thought too much about how to reconcile this interpretation with them. But regardless, I thought this was a decently interesting interpretation and I felt like I might as well share it. So I hope you enjoyed, and please let me know what you think about this video and Ymir more generally in the comments.